Here I am exposing my bottom tier to you. So this is going to be a tier list of all the subclasses, including the subclasses we got in patch 8. I will be showing you them tier by tier, working my way up from D tier up to S tier. Now for D tier, the reason I have them in this tier is because either the subclass features they have are just bad, just don't work very well, or the opportunity cost is just too high. There's so many other kind of better subclasses above, or it can just be a combination of both. Of course, this is just my opinion from what I play through. I am looking at these as if I'm playing them mostly a single class. This is like the main class of a build. I will discuss multiclassing at some point because I think it is very relevant for certain subclasses because they appear in a lot of multiclasses. Anyway, let's jump in. Wild magic. This is a barbarian. All of these are just basically in alphabetical order. You'll see inside my D tier here, I've got this wild magic barbarian, and then it's a bard subclass and a cleric. I am just going in alphabetical order. Oops, except that conjuration comes before illusion. C becomes before I. And the reason that I dislike this subclass is, yeah, we get these kind of cool wild magic effects. One thing, they're random. You might like that. Perhaps you want it to be higher, but we don't get to pick. These effects are set from when you, at level 3, when you pick the subclass, they do not get any stronger. Their DCs are set, for example here, a DC 12 Constitution saving throw, which, okay, in Act 1 is alright, but going past that run, it's just a bit crap. I'd rather it was based on a save DC based on our Constitution. I think that would be fair. And then the other features we get just aren't that good. Ooh, wow, we can, I mean, being able to give extra spell slots, like once per long rest, just isn't that impactful. Just go long rest. Long rests are so frequent, up to you. We've got potions that even do this. And so yeah, here the opportunity cost is too high. So for the Wild Magic Barbarian, opportunity cost is just far too high. And these features just do not do it for me. It can be fun. It can be interesting in a way. I'm not saying that these subclasses are unfun. And one thing I want to point out is every single subclass is viable. On Reddit, every now and again I read, ooh, is this subclass viable for honor mode? Yes, just yes. Every single subclass is fine. And part of this is because there are so many great items that you can make up for anything you lack from your subclass. Next up in D tier was the Valabard. Let's go back to the tier list for a second. We've got the Valabard here. I don't think that this is much of a surprise. Sure, we get proficiency in medium armor and shields and martial weapons, and we get extra attack at level 6. The thing is, this suffers from the opportunity cost because swords bards exist and their level 3 features are just kind of overpowered compared to the Valabard anyway. Combat inspiration is, it's okay. You can add 1d6 to a saving throw or armor class or attack roll or ability check. It's just lacking so much. It doesn't get anything else. It's still a bard. It's still great. We still get magical secrets. Nothing wrong with that. But the other subclasses just give way too much. Next up, our first cleric subclass. I'm not saying that actually clerics are bad. Clerics are pretty good. They get some awesome spells, other abilities as well. But the trickery subclass, which unfortunately is Shadowheart's default subclass. You can grant a creature advantage on stealth checks. There are other ways of doing that. I don't care about that much. I don't put much stock into stealth. I don't use characters that I make invisible and attack from like greater invisibility or something like that. This could get more use for those of you who do use stealth checks a lot more than I do. Then we get Invoke Duplicity. Now, sadly, anytime I cast this, the enemies target it. Which sure, you might be like, oh, they're not targeting one of my characters, which is a plausible use for it actually, but it disappears after it gets hit. So you might take away one attack. If you could move it around, it lasted longer, maybe didn't require concentration, then yes, this would be way more useful. But at the end of the day, when we compare it to the other channel divinities that the other cleric subclasses get, this is lacking for sure. And this Cloak of Shadows, we can just make ourselves invisible so many other ways. I'd rather just have something else at my level 6 ability here. Also, other subclasses, I do get other spells that I prefer. I want to give a nice shout out to Fear. Fear is actually a really good level 3 spell. Can really turn around some battles with a lot of enemies. They drop their weapons, they run away. All of a sudden, you don't have to worry anymore. Next up, we've got the Fighter Champion. And this is potentially one of the most boring subclasses, I would say. It barely gets anything here. The number you need to roll a critical hit while attacking is reduced by 1. This effect can stack. I think this is one of the first times I'm going to mention multiclassing because some people do pick 3 levels in Champion to actually get this effect. The thing is, if you're going all in on stacking critical hit chance, I'd probably rather just go Battle Master and have the critical hit number just 1 higher. but when I do a critical hit, I'm doing way more damage. Plus you get all the other effect that the Battle Master maneuvers do. And as we go up in level, I mean, a second fighting style is kind of cool, but for level 10, that's just crap. I'd rather have other things there. An extra jump distance. Well, we've got athlete, we've got feet, we've got the spell for it. There are some items that increase jump distance. And then you can add half your proficiency bonus to any strength, dexterity, constitution checks you're not proficient in. Well, there are barely any constitution checks anyway, because no skills are associated with them. For strength, it's athletics, and you're probably going to be proficient in athletics as a fighter anyway. And for dexterity, maybe it's a bit useful, but this just isn't that great. I just want to point out it doesn't grant a bonus to initiative rolls, so it's not even like that. Yeah, nothing to write home about. I'm not that happy with the fighter champion. And then next we've got 2 wizard subclasses. These suffer mostly from opportunity cost, especially for wizards when there are 9 subclasses in total. Same thing for clerics as well, actually. They've got 9 subclasses. So for conjuration, we can create water once per short rest, not even just on demand. Wow. Benign transposition, teleport. Gain the ability to teleport yourself. I mean, maybe there's some good use for it. Teleporting around is never a bad thing, but you're swapping position. You're not just going to any old random area. So you've got to have 2 characters in positions you want to swap. Damage taken while you're concentrating on a conjuration spell will not break your concentration. I suppose that's nice, but there are definitely ways of boosting our chances to maintain concentration. Plus, if you're not prone, you lose concentration anyway, so you've got to take care of that. It doesn't make you immune to concentration. And the number of conjuration spells that require concentration is actually really low. I think the main shout out would be Cloud Kill. Other than that, there aren't that many conjuration spells to be concentrating on. And then the Illusion Wizard. I mean, it's kind of nice that you can cast Minor Illusion as a bonus action. You can turn people around during combat, change the vision cones. That can help. Then we get See Invisibility. If I want to do that, I'll just take a potion or get Verlo to do his work on me. And then Illusory Self, just once per short rest. It's not that impactful, especially when compared to the other subclasses of Wizard. So those are my D tier picks. I rarely pick these. You might get more enjoyment out of them than I do. That's okay. You don't have to agree with me. This is not an objective list by any means anyway. It's just what I find kind of powerful for the way that I play. Some of you will play completely different to me. Some of you will love using barrels and barrelmancy, for example. It's just not my thing, so I don't really care about that, if I'm honest. Some of you take loads of long rests. I've just got this, I say, bad habit of not long resting very much. If you've ever watched any of my streams, sometimes I go 3 hours, 2 hours, 3 hours, and I might long rest once. Okay, moving up to C tier. The reason I've got these in here is that perhaps there are niche builds, like, for example, Arcane Tricksters can do really well with using scrolls, like when enemies have disadvantage on saving throws. But we do have Arcane Acuity gear anyway, so giving enemies disadvantage can become completely pointless when you've got a 100% chance for your spells to hit. Again, that's about opportunity cost. Just the subclasses above, for me, do more for me than these subclasses do here. And in this tier, I've actually got a couple of... I've actually got one example where if I was only looking at multiclassing, this would be completely different, rather than treating these subclasses as if they are the main subclass of your build. So starting off with the Knowledge Domain Cleric, you gain expertise in 2 of the following skills, which is nice to have from the very beginning. Unfortunately, the actual skills that we're given the choice in aren't too impactful. There's one fairly difficult Arcana check actually I can think of in Act 1 going into the swamp, where it would be really nice to have someone who's got expertise in Arcana, for example. This would be higher if I could get to choose different skills apart from these. But I mean, these are the ones chosen because these are all the intelligence-based skills. I really like that we get Command. That's a very strong spell. It upcasts particularly well when you've got lots of enemies around anyway. And then using our Channel Divinity, we can gain proficiency in all skills from a chosen ability. That's exactly the same as the Githyanki race ability, so you could actually make a Githyanki Knowledge Cleric and gain proficiency in in all the skills of 2 chosen abilities, which, I don't know, Charisma and Wisdom would be good choices. They've got quite a lot. They're quite much more impactful than the other ones, or Dexterity is also a good choice. But I will say that the level 6 features kind of let it down. Read thoughts. You're going to have a good intelligence to use this. And Speak with Animals is nice. It's nice, but there are some fairly cheap potions I can buy if I really want to do it. I find myself, when I first meet Volo, I just buy a bunch of Speak with Animals potions and buy some more maybe when he appears in my camp, and that does me for the game. For the Cleric level 8 subclass features, this is one of the better ones. If you use a Cleric cantrip, you deal an additional Wisdom modifier of damage. A couple of subclasses get that. I kind of like that, because at this level, I'm probably not going to be using my weapon to attack, because I'm not very good with that. My strength might not be very high in a Cleric, or dexterity for that matter. So yeah, quite nice. Next was the Nature Domain Cleric. One thing I really like about the Nature Domain Cleric is that at level 1 we get heavy armor proficiency. So I do like the fact that this, in my opinion, this is quite a good 1 level dip if for some reason you want a 1 level dip in Cleric and you don't already have heavy armor proficiency. And then you can be like kind of a half druid in a way. You get a druid cantrip, you get a proficiency that druids get, and your spells are pretty much from the druid spell list. And there's some pretty good ones here. Spike Growth, Sleet Storm in particular. I don't particularly care about Charming Beasts or plants as a channel divinity option though. That's kind of what, for me, keeps it down in C tier. And something quite unique, I don't think any other class gets this. There is an item that does this, but when you or an ally gets hit with one of these types of damage, you can actually half the attack's damage. And not quite likewise, but similarly, you can add one of these 3 types of damage if you do a weapon attack. But clerics don't get extra attack, so the usefulness of this is quite limited. And then Insect Plague is pretty good as well, actually. Again, opportunity cost, there are some far better clerics up there. But going back, we've got 2 monk subclasses. I love monks. My very first tab was a monk. And this is the first patch 8 subclass, the Drunken Master. So it looks like we get loads of cool stuff. So we can regenerate some of our key points quite early on at level 3. A little bit important. They do regenerate on a short rest anyway, but it's nice to get that. Efficiency and performance, I don't care about that. And the Flurry of Blows becomes Drunken Technique, and this is probably one of the best parts of the Drunken Monk. So you get to attack twice, which is what Flurry of Blows does normally. But then you get an extra bit of movement, 3 meters or 10 feet. And you get Disengage. So if you do stack a bit of movement onto your monks, maybe give them Crusher's Ring, the mobile feat, and then you get this on top of it, you can become a really good skirmisher. Right, then at level 4, hit a creature with your bare fists, possibly get them drunk. Getting enemies drunk in combat actually it barely does anything. It just gives disadvantage on dexterity and charisma checks. There are no charisma checks in combat. I think maybe the Glamour Bard has introduced one, to be fair. But they're basically, no, Swashbuckler. The Swashbuckler, I think, has introduced a charisma check in combat, but dexterity checks, maybe to resist shoving, but that's it. So that it sounds like it's a massive debuff, but it's really not. It's not that big of a deal in combat. The only time you want, when you use Intoxicating Strike, you gain life of the party. So you get +1 to your armor class, and you get a bonus to your attack roll, which is equal to your wisdom modifier. But that's only against drunk targets, so you have to intoxicate them first, which can be resisted. It's possibly gets them drunk as well. And it's a constitution saving throw to resist it. Most enemies are half decent at that, and it's kind of okay, but again, opportunity cost. We have, for example, Open Hand Monk. Anyway, at level 6, when you're prone, you use less movement speed. It's a nice thing, but I find my monks aren't prone that often. And I've used this a few times. When a creature misses you with a melee attack, you can spend a key point to make a reaction attack against them. That's basically a bit like Riposte, but for monks. Again, that's actually alright. Then we get Sobering Realization. So hit a drunk target and sober them up, and you deal some extra psychic damage. Let's have a quick look at how much damage that is. I've forgotten what it is right now. So 2d8 plus your wisdom modifier. But on a successful hit, the monk loses life of the party. I kind of get it thematically. All of a sudden the monk isn't like life of a party because like the enemy is sobered up. But the only real reason to have life of the party potentially is to increase your armor class or attack rolls. If you use Sobering Realization, you lose that buff. It's almost like anti-synergistic. It doesn't really work well together. Yes, you can get extra psychic damage, so if you use the Resonance Stone, you can start dealing a half decent amount of damage. And then at level 11, we can spend 2 key points to negate disadvantage. By level 11, I'm probably going to be really good at most of my rolls anyway. I've got other ways of buffing it. I mean, I love the animations, I love the idea of the Drunken Master, but Sobering Realization kind of taking away life of the party, I don't like that. Of course, you've got a Tavern Brawler. They're still going to be absolutely fine. They have no problems. Where the 4 elements, I think they're cool. They're a way of, dealing, basically casting spells. They're not spells, but effectively casting spells. We've got some half-decent spells, especially Clench the North Wind. I like that. But the key cost for a lot of these is just a bit too high. The key costs aren't listed here, but for example, let's just see, Clench the North Wind is 3 key points. When you're going to have, at level 12, you're going to have 13 key points. You can do this 4 times per short rest. That sounds okay. That is all right. But bear in mind there are other spells that you want to be casting. So Flames of the Phoenix is 4 key points. Again, they're not bad. Like, I still have used 4-element monks in the past. Generally, I just prefer the other monks. Next up, we've got 2 rogue subclasses, so Arcane Trickster and Thief. So we get some spellcasting. Spellcasting is actually generally a good thing. You know, we get to do extra things with our characters. And you can pick some cool spells. We're picking from the wizard spell list. If you're worried about using up your spell slots, then you can pick rituals anyway. I wouldn't necessarily do that completely, but you can have an extra familiar, long strider, enhanced sleep, featherfall, disguise self. One thing that perhaps should actually maybe push up Arcane Trickster now is we do get Booming Blade. We can deal that extra little bit of damage with that one attack that we get per turn. Then Magical Ambush. This is, I think, the reason you would pick an Arcane Trickster. And it's a good ability. It has been bugged in the past. There's some stipulations to this bug that make it work or don't work. But like I said, since we've got Arcane Acuity in the game, you can just have a 100% chance for your spells to work. At which point, disadvantage is just superfluous. It means nothing. It's not that Arcane Tricksters are the worst or anything, but they're certainly not the best. And then the Thief. So for multiclassing, Thieves are amazing. At level 3, you get an extra bonus action. That's where the power of the Thief stops, at level 3. Because at level 9, all we get is you can become invisible once per short rest. Again, we've got potions for this. Spell slots if you really want. There are a couple of items that give invisibility anyway as a spell once per long rest, I think it is. The Fetches of Calidor and Small Hands, and the other one that also gives a blur on the same ring. I've forgotten the name of it right now. Sure, they'll be quite good at dual wielding hand crossbows, for example. But yeah, I'm rarely going to have Thief as like the main subclass in a build. It's always going to be a level 3 or 4 dip into Thief, and rarely any further. Next, a Sorcerer. This might be the first slightly controversial pick, I think. Sorcerers are very strong because of Quicken Spell. The reason I put Wild Magic down here is that actually this is potentially detrimental. If you love the randomness of it, then this is going to be very high in your personal tier list, I imagine. There's a whole load of things to go through here, some of which are great until the end of your next turn. You can use a bonus action to teleport. That's cool. You can enchant weapons. You can get sorcery points restored. But on the other hand, you can summon hostile enemies. You get transformed. You're slowed. You summon a Cambion. Yeah, you know, pretty random. Can be fun, but also can really like mess you up as well. So this kind of takes the fact that it's potentially that detrimental kind of takes that away. Definitely give it a shot for something a little bit different. But like I said, it's a sorcerer at the end of the day. You've still got Quicken Spell and you've got Arcane Acuity if you really want to use that. I keep mentioning it, but this is what I meant about items. Items can really just make your any character make your character really strong. Next was an Archfey Warlock. Fey Presence kind of is cool. I used it a little bit when I did play with an Archfey Warlock, but it uses your action and it's only a possibility. It's not like guaranteed to do that. And the other thing that I think lets down the Archfey Warlock kind of are these extra spells that we get to choose from. Fairy Fire's alright, but you probably want to concentrate on something else. Sleep is good early on, but later in the game pulls off a bit. I suppose with the Warlock spell slot, which you upcast it, you can put creatures to sleep much earlier. Calm Emotions, it's okay, it has its uses. Phantasmal Force, it's just crap actually. Blink, I haven't tested Blink in a while, but it used to break concentration if you did blink. Didn't like that. Plant Growth is okay. Yeah, these other spells are just they're alright, but I'd rather have other spells to choose from. This one's kind of cool, quite unique. Misty Escape. Upon taking damage, you become invisible, and you can cast Misty Step next turn, which will break invisibility. But you got to bear in mind with Blink and Misty Escape, oh, it's cool, you can disappear. You are then making the chances of the remaining characters in your party, the chances of them being hit goes up. If it was purely random from 25% to 33%, it never is purely random. The AI does choose enemies based on whether they're concentrating, well, us, not enemies, concentrating, maybe their armor class quite often, their hit points, whether they're downed or not, can all affect the choices of the AI. And one last thing that kind of, I think, lets down the Archfey is that you can't be charmed. Very few enemies try and charm you anyway. This barely comes up. And lastly, in C tier, I put the Transmutation Wizard. If you've got someone in camp, like a follower, or one of the minions in camp, and you make them a Transmutation Wizard, it's brilliant. Like, that's like S tier, because they can do a whole load of stuff for you. You can brew 2 alchemical solutions instead of 1 when you combine your extracts. That's especially useful kind of early in the game when you can make some Bloodlust potions and potions of speed. But towards the end of the game, I'm not using it that much. And then we can make one of these stones. Yeah, kind of cool. And it's nice we get a choice, but it's only like a minor little buff. By the end of the game, it's probably not that impactful. Most of them are just resistance to a type of damage, which actually can be quite useful potentially if you know about combats that are coming up. And you know that an enemy, say, even the House of Hope, perhaps you want to give resistance to fire. that'd be a good choice, right? And then shape changer, you can transform into a blue jay and you can fly. I mean, that's not so bad. That's why it's in C tier, not D tier, basically. Can get you around, but there are other ways to get flying, especially with a certain choice between somewhere around Act 3, let's just say. You could just get fly innately anyway, which then completely nullifies this ability. So that's my C tier. You can certainly build some strong characters from C tier. There's no doubt about that. But it wouldn't be a tier list if I didn't have things in different tiers. Relative, not everything can be S tier, basically, Moving on to B tier, just want to point out that B tier is a solid tier. You'll definitely get something strong to the party. Some of these give some great versatility, you might bring something a bit different. The other thing that I've mentioned so far is also opportunity cost. What are we losing out on by picking these subclasses? There are quite a lot of subclasses here. As I mentioned earlier, every subclass is feasible, every subclass is viable. There's nothing necessarily wrong with these subclasses here. It's just that the ones in the tiers above have got that little bit extra. So starting with the Barbarian Wild Heart, I think that could almost be a case of putting this in A tier. One thing I really love about the Wild Heart Barbarian is we get loads of different choices, like versatility. We get to pick one of 5 different bestial hearts, and then if you keep going, you actually get to pick 2 animal aspects, like all the different combinations. There are loads of them. I'm sure they've all been tried out by now. There are only a limited number, but you can really customize your barbarian here. And the nice thing is that every level up, you can switch between these hearts, bestial hearts. Obviously, you can just respec anyway, but you don't have to go through that whole process when you level up. And I think this just brings something a bit different to a barbarian compared to most of the other subclasses. I suppose wild magic brings something completely different, but these are reliable. We know what's going to happen when we pick a certain bestial heart. Tiger's Bloodlust works really well with any weapon that deals damage in an area or gives out some sort of effect, or have an effect when enemies are bleeding, for example. I'm not going to go through all of them. It takes way too long. You try it out. Wild Heart Barbarians are great. Next up is the second of the 4 Bard subclasses, the Glamour Bard. When I first read Mantle of Majesty command, I would admit I was like, oh, that's just command. I can do it once per long rest, and it requires concentration. That is how I thought. I think I said those words almost word for word. But, I haven't even got to this bit, but it lasts for 10 turns, which is basically a whole combat. The main downside to it, in my opinion, is it requires concentration. If it didn't require concentration, Glamour would be even higher. What's not said here, just going to check if it says it here. Alright, it does say it here now. The command we get is way more powerful than the regular command, just in the sense that it can target and command undead. So if Balthazar thinks he's going to be casting any spells, sorry buddy, you're going to be thrown on the floor. I've not tried it against Ansur yet. I haven't got to that part in my patch 8 playthrough, but I see no reason why it wouldn't work. You stack a Glamour Bard with Arcane Acuity gear, you're going to be telling your enemies what to do. The other thing, this comes up a little bit, it's not going to be there's not a very high chance this will work, but targets that are charmed automatically fail their saving throw. There is a way to make enemies charmed with the subclass. So you can imbue 2 allies, and as you level up, it gets to 3 and eventually 4 allies with temporary hit points, and if they're hit with a melee attack, the attacker becomes charmed. It doesn't matter where the source of charm has come from actually. If an enemy is charmed, they just won't pass the saving throw against the Mantle of Majesty. The other thing keeping this in B tier is this is once per long rest. If it was once per short rest, I'd easily be A tier. Also, these extra temporary hit points, it's not a huge amount, but it adds up. And then mid-game, Act 2, you can target 3 creatures, give them 24 temporary hit points in total, 8 each. And that's not quite free healing, but you're mitigating damage before it's done. And that's really nice. And when you get to level 10, that's 44 hit points. That's a couple of hits. I mean, it's just a couple of hits, I suppose. But it means you have to do less healing outside of combat. You don't have to worry so much. Plus, it's a bard. We get magical secrets, full caster still. Don't sleep on Mantle of Majesty command. Use it against those undead bosses. Next up are 2 cleric subclasses. I think some people will find this slightly controversial, life being in B tier, and we've got war. I've put war in B tier here. So the life subclass, the level 1 feature is great. We get heavy armor proficiency, and when you cast a healing spell, the target gains additional hit points equal to 2 plus the spell's level. And your channel divinity is healing. Everything's based around healing. Okay? When you heal others, it heals you as well. And that's great. That's all good. But honestly, healing during combat, even with a life cleric, well, I will say that this AoE heal can come in clutch. This can be really, really useful. Obviously, you can also make anyone who is healing others, you can give them items that buff them, and that's great. So you can give everyone Bless and Blade Ward with this Preserve Life, and it heals a fairly decent, really quite a decent amount of healing is done. But often, it's better to just attack or control an enemy so they don't hit you. Outside of this Preserve Life, I still don't find healing spells worth casting during combat, apart from maybe to spread out buffs. So like a level 1 Cure Wounds will do 1d8 plus your Wisdom modifier, plus an extra 3. No, plus 3, that's not really very much. So if your Wisdom modifier, even if it's 5, right, you're doing 1d8 plus 5 plus 1. It's 1d8 plus 6 healing for level 1 Cure Wounds. I'm trying to point out, don't cast a level 1 Cure Wounds in combat. Enemies are going to be dealing 12 to 20 or even higher damage as you get to higher and higher levels. You may as well spend your action trying to stop the enemy from hurting you, however you do that. But life domain clerics are kind of, to me, the stereotypical cleric. Right, then the war domain. Sometimes this gets brought up in multi-classes, like 1 level in war domain cleric, just so you can use this. You can make an extra attack with a bonus action. I'm never that really brought over by this because it's 3 times per long rest. What's that? 1 extra attack per fight on average? If we're doing like 1 short rest after every battle, that doesn't win me over, put it that way. But I mean, as a pure class, we get proficiency in heavy armor and martial weapons. It's a nice way to get proficiency in those without taking 1 level in fighter or paladin, or first level in fighter or paladin or ranger. Then after that, guided strike, when you really need an attack to hit, you can do it. Or maybe a war cleric is actually going to be attacking more often, to be fair. Where it really comes into play is level 6, where you can endow a nearby ally. That's what you want to be doing. The domain spells, they're pretty cool. I mean, some of these are cleric spells anyway. You know, spiritual weapons, spirit guardians, hold monster potentially. They're okay, they're alright. And as we level up, we do get more war priest charges. So as a single class, when we get up to level 11, we got 6 extra attacks per long rest. That's starting to mean something now. But yeah, B tier, it's solid. It does a cleric's job. Nothing wrong with that. Back to the tier list. Got another druid subclass, Circle of the Land, which is a bit like a wizard. It's got abilities very similar to a wizard. I mean, this does the same thing as the wizard's ability as well. You can replenish spell slots. You get an extra cantrip, which is nice. Having more cantrips is always good. And you get to choose some extra spells to have. And what I like is that you get to choose. And say you pick Arctic at level 3, you don't need to pick Arctic at level 5 as well. You can pick Coast if you want to. And so some of these have some pretty cool spells that sometimes druids don't get access to. Some of them are druid spells, for example. So if you want something kind of non-druidic, and you can see here, the BG3 wiki is great. Absolutely love it. Spells marked with a star are not on the druid spell list. So, for example, maybe Blur and Silence, maybe Mirror Image and Misty Step. Or you just want to have more druid spells, so you pick like Arctic, and then you don't have to pick these as your spells known. As we level up on the odd levels, up to level 9, we get to pick an extra 2 spells. Difficult terrain no longer slows you down. Advanced on saving throws against plants that are magically created to impede your movement. Actually, that doesn't happen too often. Potentially a bit in Act 2. Outside of that, actually, really doesn't happen that much. Again, this would help in Act 2. Plant-based surfaces with thorns, spines, or similar hazards no longer harm you. The level 10 feature kind of lets it down a bit though. You can't be charmed or frightened by elementals and fae. We come across so few elementals and fae, let alone ones that will frighten or charm us, that just isn't that useful. Disease and poison also no longer affect you. That's right. There aren't that many diseases in the game either. So, I mean, it kind of sounds cool, but not actually that impactful. A solid druid. If you want to be a spellcasting, join all druids are spellcasting, but if you want to focus on the spellcasting, this is the druid for you. So on the way of the shadow druid, we get minor illusion. Kind of nice to have. We probably won't be casting it that much. We can hide as a bonus action. Always good to have. Other subclasses do get that, but it's just an extra source of it. We get a few extra spells. The main problem with these spells is the key cost 2 for each of these spells, and I don't find myself casting these spells that often. You could create like a darkness party, in which case I would definitely suggest a Way of a Shadow Monk. You can become invisible if you're obscured, and Shadow Step is the best. I did a solo honor mode and eventually dishonor mode with the level 6 Shadow Monk. That was picked at random, and level 6, I think it was a Paladin. That was picked at random at level 6. Anyway, I love Shadow Step. Shadow Step is amazing. You can just bounce around. Where you're teleporting to and from do have to be in shadow, but there are plenty of places that have shadow that are lightly obscured. Use it. And you also get advantage on your next attack roll, so never a bad thing. I mostly use this for teleportation while exploring and moving around, or to get out of trouble. And at level 11, you get Shadow Strike. The main downside to me here is it's 3 key points, and it does an extra 3d8 psychic damage. 3d8 doesn't add up to very much by the end of the game. With the Resonance Stone, this is good because all psychic damage is doubled. The enemy becomes vulnerable to psychic damage. Can be useful, but for 3 key points, starting to get a bit costly. Next up, the first Paladin subclass. Some people might even say that Devotion should be A tier. The reason that I've put the Devotion subclass in B tier is really opportunity cost. Paladins are great Smites are great. Who doesn't like being able to smite enemies and protect your allies with an aura? One thing that really lets down, I'd say lets down, the Oath of Devotion is that Sacred Weapon costs an action. So I'd say you really need to cast this ahead of combat. You don't want to use an action in combat to do this, really. And this Holy Rebuke, it honestly, for a single channel Oath charge, 1d4 radiant damage, that's crap. That's just awful. And the aura we get, you and nearby allies can't be charmed. As I mentioned earlier, there aren't that many enemies that actually try and charm you anyway. So I'd rather have some of the other auras, special auras. You still get the usual aura of adding your charisma modifier to saving throws. So at level 6, it's not mentioned here because it's not a subclass thing. So it's still a paladin, still smites, still great, still a great class. But there are just kind of better subclasses of paladin out there. Who's next? We've got the Gloomstalker. This is another one where if I was talking about multi-classing, this would definitely be higher because most of the power comes from the early levels. It's kind of front-loaded. You get Disguise Self, which you can use to make race-specific items work on your character if you so wish. Umbral Shouder, I don't really use that much. You get extra Dark Vision, but Dread Ambush, so this is what we're here for. And we've got another subclass that can hide with a bonus action. So you can do one extra attack in the first round of combat, which deals extra damage. What's not great about that? But this is where the majority of kind of the power of the Gloomstalker stops. You know, we get proficiency in wisdom and intelligence saving throws. That is useful. That's not a bad thing. So your ranger would be proficient in 4 types of saving throws. The wisdom one is probably the more important one. The intelligence saving throws become more important towards the end of the game. And then when you miss with a weapon attack, you can make another one for free. That's not so bad, but you can only use it once per turn. So it's not like you miss attack, miss attack, miss attack, miss attack. But if we're talking about kind of single class rangers, I think it loses out to the other subclasses. Talking of other subclasses, actually in the same tier, B tier. Swarmkeeper. I will say I've not played with a Swarmkeeper at the higher levels for a very long time. So please do correct me if I'm wrong. That's what I do like about the Swarmkeeper. The Swarm deals additional damage to creatures marked by Hunter's Mark. So if you mark an enemy with Hunter's Mark, the Hunter's Mark damage gets added twice. Once from you, once from your Swarm. So instead of being 1d6, it's an extra 2d6. Plus, we can teleport. The teleport distance isn't very high, but it's a free teleportation. That's not to be knocked. We can do extra types of damage, piercing, lightning, or psychic, all of which you can make enemies vulnerable to one way or another. So using the Ballast Armor for piercing, make enemies wet for lightning, and have the Resonance Stone nearby for the Flurry of Moths. And then you can knock back or shock or blind, and these are pretty cool. The utility options are great. Then at level 7, you can effectively fly 3 times per short rest. That's pretty cool. And then at level 11, your legions, your swarms get even stronger. So they deal 1d8 damage instead of 1d6. Honestly, by level 11, I would have much preferred a bit of a higher damage die there. It's really not much extra damage. On average, it's like 1 extra damage. Your teleportation then grants you 2 armor class, which makes it definitely worth using every single turn. And then, these start becoming great. I mean, I kind of prefer the utility of the jellyfish and moths myself. So not only will enemies become blind, they become slowed. But the moths and jellyfish, not only are they shocked, but they also become disarmed. And disarming enemies is so good. Not that every enemy can be, but those that can be, it can actually be worth leaving the weapon on the ground. I know, take the weapon away. But sometimes the enemies use their action to equip their weapon. And that means they don't attack you in any way. Some enemies have a ranged weapon, so they would shoot you. Some might be able to cast spells. But when they go and pick up the weapon, I feel like it's a win, because I am not dying. Thank you very much. Then we've got 2 rogue subclasses, Assassin and Swashbuckler. Again, for the Assassin, if we're talking about multiclassing, this is going right towards the top, because there are some great Assassin multiclasses. This is specifically for this bit here. Any successful attack against a surprise creature is a critical hit. You've got to hit them first, but that's usually guaranteed, or near enough guaranteed, a very high chance, 90+% chance. And if you know you're getting a critical hit, you can do some juicy damage, especially if you're dealing piercing damage and you've got the Ballast Armor, but then the level 9 ability just kind of sucks so badly. Why are you going to continue leveling up in Assassin to get this level 9 ability? I know you get extra sneak attack damage, okay, that's probably why you would do it. But you've got 9 levels to play with. Go and use another subclass, another class. So yeah, for multiclassing, Assassin is great. If it's your main class, it kind of sucks a bit. Then the Swashbuckler. I've been having loads of fun with the Swashbuckler. So you get fancy footwork. If you make a melee attack against the target, they can't make opportunity attacks against you. Basically, it's like half of having the mobile feat. Cool. You get a +2 bonus to initiative rolls from the beginning. So you're going to have a decent dexterity probably as a rogue. I'm guessing 18 or 20. And you get +2 bonus from the subclass and just a little bit extra from your gear, you can have a very high initiative without having to take alert. I know alert has an extra ability to it, but the majority of the time you're not being surprised. And if you know the game already, then you can stop yourself from being surprised in most of the situations anyway. Then we get rakish sneak attack. So you don't have to have an ally within 5 feet of the enemy, and you don't have to have advantage, just so long as there isn't another enemy within 2 meters of the target. It makes using sneak attack even easier than it already is. And then they get at level 4. I absolutely love this. Dirty Trick. So few subclasses get extra features at level 4. This is not completely unique, but fairly unique. I suppose it's not unique then, is it? But, you know, it's quite rare. So Dirty Trick, flicker the wrist, flick your weapon at a target, possibly disarm them. The amazing thing about this is it does your regular weapon's worth of damage. So enemies who are wielding a weapon will basically have 2 attacks made against them from a swashbuckler. The downside to this, I had a swashbuckler during Act 2, and you'll find during Act 2 that aren't a huge number of enemies with a weapon, but it picks up in Act 3. There are many more with a weapon in Act 3. But that's not your only use of a bonus action. You can have Sand Toss and possibly blind an enemy, which can also proc sneak attack, so you can sneak attack someone by throwing sand in their face. Or if you're not actually close by an enemy, you're keeping your party back for a bit, you got Vicious Mockery. Sure, it doesn't do much damage, but you're getting some use out of your bonus action every turn, no matter what. And lastly, Panache. Roll a persuasion check to beguile a humanoid who must contest it with an insight check. Sorry, earlier when I was talking about, who was it? The Drunken Master, making enemies have disadvantage with charisma checks. Actually, the enemy makes an insight check, which is a wisdom check anyway. Now, I would rarely use this because it uses an action, but you can charm enemies, which then works with a Glamour Bard potentially, but it does have to be a humanoid. You can't use it on every single enemy. So a bit like the other rogue subclasses, this kind of falls off after level 4. You've got 8 levels. You could, do well by putting it in fighter and have 4 feats anyway. A barbarian, a ranger, any melee class really, and you can do quite well. All right, we're getting through B tier. Next up, a sorcerer, B tier, shadow magic. I've played with the shadow magic sorcerer. I do like it, but it's just not quite as strong as I want it to be. So you get extra dark vision. Strength of the Grave. After reaching 0 hit point, you regain 1 instead of becoming downed. That's cool, nice and defensive. You can stack that with something maybe like the Half-Orc or Barbarian even. The Barbarian sorcerers don't generally work well with each other. You can cast Darkness, fine. And the Hound of Ill Omen. You get for 3 sorcery points, you can summon a nice dog called Nimbus. What does Nimbus or the Hound of Ill Omen do for you? Well, when you bite enemies, you can potentially place an omen on them, which then gives you the opportunity to regain sorcery points. It's possibly place an omen though, it's not guaranteed. If it gets hit, it can splinter off and create an extra ally on the field. You can't control the splinter shadow actually, but it's always good to have an extra ally on the field. This right behind you, I've never actually seen this work or happen. So this reaction is triggered when the Hexblade. So yeah, this is kind of, I guess, kind of like a bug. It can additionally be acquired by Nimbus by moving adjacent to an accursed spectre. So it's some sort of Hexblade. That's all a bit strange. I wouldn't say this is a normal thing for Nimbus to have. I'm not even going to talk about that anymore. Now, the nice thing about Nimbus, the Hound of Ill Omen, is that if he survives during the day, you have a long rest, he's there tomorrow. When I had a Shadow Sorcerer, actually Nimbus rarely died. I was casting Aid to make sure everyone had a few extra hit points. But he's got 42 hit points. You can keep him alive. And, when you short rest, he gets half his hit points back. His armor class is 18. That isn't that bad. By the time you're in Act 3, this might not be enough to keep him alive throughout a whole day. But I was definitely, getting a net gain from using the Hound of Ill Omen. If you send him in by himself, he's going to die and you're not going to get your sorcery points back. And then Shadow Walk, teleport into the shadows, into the next spell you cast. That turn will benefit from distant spell without casting any sorcery points. That's kind of cool. You get an extra meta magic almost for free. At the cost of a bonus action, you get an extra meta magic for free, or without costing any sorcery points. It's not necessarily the best meta magic, but I think the idea is you could teleport back away, far away, and then cast the spell you were going to cast anyway and still hit your enemy. Still a sorcerer, still cool, still works really well. Next up, we've got the Warlock, great old one. When you land a critical hit against a creature, which I suppose you can be doing more often if you're using Eldritch Blast at higher levels, just because you're getting more attacks out, and you can equip weapons items that decrease the number needed for a critical hit. Nearby enemies must succeed on a wisdom saving throw or become frightened. when that works, that's actually really useful. It takes them out of base. Not completely takes them out, but they can't move, and any attacks they do have disadvantage, so they're really heavily debuffed. These spells are fairly decent spells, quite happy with those, but potential spells to choose from when you get to level 3, I don't like them. And level 5, I don't particularly like Bestow Curse. It has its uses, but again, not great. Slow is good though. You can impose disadvantage on an attack roll. That's nice, but it's only once per short rest. Like, yeah, you know, if you get attacked twice in one combat, you can only use it once, and then you get resistance to psychic damage. Potentially useful against certain types of enemies, but not very many enemies have this. But if you do take psychic damage, then they take the same damage, but bear in mind that it is resisted, so you're going to take half the damage. It's kind of alright. If you're going for a critical hit build, it might be worth taking one level of Mortal Reminder, just so that when you do get a critical hit, you actually have an extra debuff potentially. An extra debuff on the enemy. And lastly, in B tier, there are 3 wizard subclasses: Enchantment, Evocation, and Necromancy. Again, it's okay to disagree with me, just explain why. If you just tell me, you suck because you put Evocation in B tier, that's not useful for anyone. You're just trying to make yourself feel better, basically. So at level 2, the level 2 ability isn't great. If you've got nothing else to do with your turn, and Hypnotic Gaze, okay, you can use it once per long rest. That's the other thing that kind of sucks. And if the target takes damage, the effect ends. So I'm not really here for that. The only thing I'm really here for is a level 10 ability. Your enchantments, you know your enchantments inside out. You can target 2 creatures with enchantment spells that would normally only target 1. A strong thing here would be, let's have a look at them, right? Hold Person is the one I'm quite often going for. Let's have a look down here. Potentially Tasha's Hideous Laughter, Hold Monster, Otto's Irresistible Dance. It's much more impactful, I would say, at the higher level, for the higher level spells, because you only get 1 level 6 spell slot. So the fact you can cast this on 2 people, that's cool. Hold Monster, you can cast that on 2 monsters now. That's cool. Crown of Madness on 2 people. That's cool. Not all of these will benefit, and wizards can't cast all of these anyway. But some of these are some of the very strong spells, control spells out there, and targeting 2 enemies instead of 1 for free. It's great. It's amazing. That's kind of the only thing an enchantment wizard does well, though. Next is Evocation. Again, that might be slightly controversial. I know lots of people love the Evocation Wizard. Again, not saying it's bad. B tier is solid. So Sculpt spells. Create pockets of safety within your Evocation spells. Allies automatically succeed to saving throws and take no damage from these spells. That's good. You can try and position yourself so that you don't have to worry about this, but it's not always possible. Sometimes you might just catch your allies with a fireball or a shatter. It can make you a bit lazy. I mean, it doesn't matter, actually, but you can worry about positioning a little bit less, so it makes the game a little bit easier. Get Potent Cantrip and Empowered Evocation. So for Potent Cantrip, you still do half the cantrip's damage. Hopefully you've got high enough spell save DC that doesn't come into effect too much. And Empowered Evocation, your grasp of Evocation magic has tightened. You can add your intelligence modifier to damage rolls with any evocation spells. It works particularly well with Magic Missile, but outside that, you're not going to get a huge amount of extra damage done. It does help out with cantrips, but you know, Fireball is what, 68 or 68 plus 5. So plus 5 is great, but compared to what you can get from the dice are kind of more important here. So yeah, easy to use school. Don't have to worry too much about where you're putting people. You know when you're going to use your evocation spells, you're gonna deal some damage or extra damage. And lastly, I put the Necromancy School in B tier. Again, these tiers, the individual tiers are just sorted out alphabetically here. I'm not saying that the Wild Heart is like top of B tier and Necromancy is bottom of B tier. If I'm saying that, I'm then ranking every single one. I may as well just have a ranked list of numbers rather than tiers, in my opinion. So for the level 2 feature, I don't particularly care about that. One thing you want to have this for is here, when you use Animate Dead, you can raise an additional corpse, which helps when you upcast it. And the creatures you do summon with Animate Dead have extra hit points and do a little bit of extra damage, and you become resistant to necrotic damage. Unfortunately, by the time you want to be resistant to necrotic damage, you're past most enemies that deal it in Act 2. There are enemies in Act 3 that do deal necrotic damage, but yeah, I'd rather have this earlier in the game. If you want to be an undead summoner, this is the perfect school for you. But again, kind of opportunity costs come into play here. We've got A tier to deal with and compare to. Moving on to A tier. Now, these subclasses will often be strong throughout the game, and we see some classes that really start to shine and perhaps don't need that many items or feats, and they're starting to be very strong indeed. So starting with the Barbarian, the Giant Barbarian. So Giant Barbarians get this extra type of rage, Giant's Rage. You become larger, so I think you look cooler. Your rage damage bonus is doubled when you throw things, so there are some bugs. Your carrying capacity is increased by a quarter, which now stacks with the human ability as of, well, today. This is when I'm recording it, when the hotfix came out. You get Thaumaturgy, although as a Barbarian, you quite often, not always, but often enough, get advantage on some charisma check by being a Barbarian, not a Giant Barbarian. But yeah, having Thaumaturgy at hand, on hand, at will, it's great to have. Boot of the Giants, you can add Tavern Brawler to this if you want to. There's a little bit of damage, something kind of a bit different to do with your bonus action. But really what I love about the Giant Barbarian is Elemental Cleaver. So while raging, unfortunately it doesn't work outside of rage, you can choose to add one of these different types of damage to an attack. So, and you can actually attack, let's say with Acid, and then use Elemental Cleaver during your turn and then deal extra lightning damage. And there are lots of items that interact with these different types of damage, so you can really like pick and choose your build for your Giant Barbarian if you want to really focus on one element. Or you can make enemies vulnerable to some of these types of damage as well. And not just that. And the weapon gains the throw property, and if you throw it, it will immediately reappear in your hand. So if you want to make a throwing build that isn't a Berserker Barbarian, this is a way to go about it. And lastly, Mighty Impel. Throw a creature or object that is medium-sized or smaller. It has a set distance, whereas usually how far you can throw something depends on your strength. And there's no minimum strength requirement. So you could actually build like a dexterity-based barbarian, if you so wished, and you'll still be able to throw people with your bonus action. Pretty cool. But for me, Elemental Cleaver is where the Giant Barbarian is at. Next up is a Bard subclass, the Lore Bard. So first of all, you gain proficiency in 3 extra skills. It's not like the most important thing, but it is a useful thing to have though. Cutting Words. You can make enemies potentially fail saving throws or miss their attacks. The ability check doesn't come up so often, but it's a nice way to debuff enemies. And then at level 6, you get an extra lot of magical secrets, which is not to be sniffed at, because at this point you can start picking counterspell or, I don't know, haste. Let's have a look at the list again. Fireball, I've made a build with Warden of Vitality, which is pretty cool, I thought. Hunger of Hadar, some people like Cool Lightning. Sleet Storm is great. Loads of great choices. And then when you get to level 10, you get to pick 2 more. So this makes it a tiny bit easier to pick your magical secrets because you can pick more magical secrets. Command is also not a bad choice, even though it's a level 1 spell. You basically can't go wrong with a College of Lore Bard. All right, next up, 3 cleric subclasses in a row. Death, Light, Tempest. I will say my favorite cleric subclass is Light. So Death Domain Cleric. We get proficiency in martial weapons. That's okay. For a cleric, I'm not usually using my martial weapon anyway. The subclass comes online at level 1. Your necromancy cantrips that can only target one creature can target an additional creature. You gain additional spells from your domain, so you know, like the necromancy cantrips already. These are great. Bone Chill and Toll the Dead, you can use them every single combat. You can twin your cantrips from level 1 for free every single turn. What's not to like? When you hit a creature with a melee attack, you can use your Channel Divinity to deal an extra 5 plus 2 times your cleric level necrotic damage. I've said this about clerics throughout the video. Don't find them using my melee weapon that much anyway. So it's nice, I suppose, to use it, but when I've played with my Death Domain Cleric, I really haven't got much use out of this Channel Divinity. It's probably going to be most useful if an enemy is held, so you know you're going to hit. Then you can deal like extra damage from your weapon, plus the necrotic damage, but the necrotic damage won't actually be doubled or anything, or from a critical hit, because there are no dice rolled. Then you get damage you deal ignores resistance to necrotic damage, and it comes just at the right time, because in Act 2, there are loads of enemies that are resistant. Some are immune, and this doesn't help with that. Some are just resistant to necrotic damage, so that really helps you keep on dealing that damage. Then the Divine Strike, yeah, same thing as before. I'm probably not going to be hitting with a weapon, but if I am going to hit with a weapon, I get my extra necrotic damage there, and I'm probably going to use this at the same time. And if the enemy is resistant to it, well, they're not anymore. So Death Domain Clerics focus on one thing, and they do it really well. Next is Light. Oh, the light domain is just, I think, yeah, I just love it. Warding Flare. Every turn you can use a reaction to impose disadvantage on one attack. Just a single attack though, not every single attack, but every single turn. Then at level 2, Radiance of the Dawn. Oh, I just love this. It's a great AoE to have, and it's radiant damage, and there are so many items that like help debuff enemies when you deal radiant damage that this is just brilliant. The extra spells we get is particularly Scorching Ray and Fireball. Scorching Ray if you want a fire acuity hat, for example. Fireball's just Fireball. And then level 6, not only can you use Warding Flare on yourself, you can use it to protect an ally. You also get Wall of Fire. Guardian of Faith, I've kind of fallen out of favour of Guardian of Faith actually as time's gone on. Just like with the Knowledge Domain, you get to add your Wisdom modifier to cantrips that you cast, cleric cantrips, and then at level 9, you get Destructive Wave. I love this spell. So few subclasses get access to this as well. I just love the Light Domain Cleric. It's strong. It heals, it buffs, it deals damage, and debuffs. It just kind of does everything. Next up, the Tempest Domain. proficiency in heavy armor and martial weapons. That's cool. Same as the war domain. You get a use for your reaction, dealing a little bit of extra damage. Not much, but a little bit. It helps. And then your channel divinity. When you roll thunder or lightning damage, you can deal maximum damage instead. That's amazing. That's what is making the Tempest domain be at A tier for me. We get some pretty good spells as well. Domain spells, Cool Lightning, Sleet Storm, Ice Storm, and also Destructive Wave. And then when you deal thunder or lightning damage, you can knock people back. And that's alright. It fits the theme. Rarely does it help like a huge amount. But yeah, another really solid cleric domain there. Next, we then have 3 druids subclasses, Moon, Stars, and Spores. And they all do really, really different things. So Circle of the Moon, now that Tavern Brawler works with it in honor mode, this is just really cool. Yeah, you like wild shaping? Then be Circle of the Moon. Not only do you get to kind of morph into these extra different things, it's an extra source of hit points. And like Circle of the Moon druids will be really hard to kill if you're playing them properly. And at level 10, you get the Water Myrmidons. Yeah, that is so awesome. Just get extra shapes. Kind of what's not to like about Circle of the Moon druids, especially now that Tavern Brawler works. And the great thing about Circle of the Moon druids is you don't really need that many items. Like the power comes from wild shaping, and when you're wild shaped, you barely get benefit from items that you're wearing. Next up for me, Circle of the Stars. I've made a video about this fairly recently. I do wonder if me putting Circle of the Stars in A tier is just because it's new and shiny and it's really making me happy. But you get guidance. Now you can get guidance as a druid anyway, but it means you don't have to pick guidance at level 1 and you can pick an extra cantrip of your choice. That's me. If I've got a druid, I am picking guidance as a cantrip. You might not, but now you don't have to. And instead of wild shaping into an animal, you wild shape into different starry forms. And the archer and dragon can let you do some extra damage with your bonus action every single turn. They're dealing radiant damage, and as I mentioned for the light domain cleric, that means you can debuff the enemy with certain items, and then you can start casting Guiding Bolt. You can start buffing or debuffing allies and enemies. And then at level 10, your starry forms change and get stronger. The dragon can even fly for a little bit anyway. And you can switch to a different starry form as a free action every turn. It's cool. The starry forms are amazing. Not only, sorry, it doesn't go to dragon here. Not only can you deal extra damage, when you make a saving throw to maintain concentration, a roll of 9 or lower is considered as a 10. Most of the time, for lots of the game, 10 is actually going to be the number you're aiming for anyway. The only time it's going to be above 10, if half the damage done is equal to higher than 10, then that's what the saving throw will be. So if they did like 26 damage, the saving throw is going to be 13. Yeah, love the Circle of the Stars. And again, very different to Circle of the Moon. And then Circle of the Spores, very different to the other 2 druid subclasses already. So here, you're kind of half going to be like a necromancer. You can use Halo of Spores as a reaction every turn. You deal a little bit of extra damage. It's not a huge amount, but it kind of adds up. Every little helps. And what I've seen someone talk about recently, kind of in defense of Circle of the Spores druids, is you can cast this, it says upon a target. They were saying that you could actually cast this on, like, you can put a potion on the ground and then use Halo of Spores on it so it breaks open. So it's kind of using a reaction to drink a potion, which I thought was pretty cool. And you get Symbiotic Entity, so gain 4 temporary hit points per druid level and deal an additional 1d6 necrotic damage when you have them. So some people do use this to multi-class to make their other classes deal more damage, and it's great for survivability. So by the time you're level 12, you get an extra 48 temporary hit points, which is some of the largest number of temporary hit points I think you can get. So your Circle of the Spores druid's also probably not going to die. You get Animate Dead, and then you also get Fungal Infestation to raise fungal zombies. You get 4 of them. You're going to have a horde of allies around with you. Some people don't like summoning them, particularly in Baldur's Gate 3, because it really slows the combat down. And I understand that. That doesn't mean it's weak. And then level 10, you get Spreading Spores, and there's some armor made, specifically made for Circle of Spores druids as well. Again, really strong, completely different style of play compared to the other druid circles. Next up, 2 fighter subclasses. I've really struggled here. These were almost in S tier. I will admit, I do love the fighter subclasses, and this is why Champion's all the way down in D tier. So starting with the Arcane Archer, we get proficiency in 2 skills. I don't particularly care about that. You can choose between these 3 cantrips, potentially another source of guidance, and your fighter's probably not going to be concentrating on much anyway. This is worth it. Don't pick True Strike. Do you know what? Whoever's made this hasn't made True Strike properly, because True Strike is concentration. But they haven't put it here because they know nobody's going to pick True Strike anyway. So we get to choose these arrows, and this is really strong from very early on. You can banish your target. It's not guaranteed, like potentially, but the enemy makes a charisma saving throw. I use this against the Spider Matriarch. Thank you very much. I deal with everything else first, just to leave you there without actually killing me, so I don't take damage. Banishing is really strong and stays relevant throughout the game. And then we get all these other types of arrows we can use, and you can use maybe in the early levels you can only use 4, but it does replenish on a short rest. And as we level up, by the time we get to level, let's say level 10, you get 10 arcane arrows, and you can short rest. Those 10 arcane arrows will last you a combat, and then you can short rest. Bear in mind, you do have action surge, so you could potentially use 6 of these different arcane shots in one turn. I'm not saying you should, but I think that's cool. All of your ranged attacks are considered magical to overcome resistance. You're probably going to be using a magic weapon by level 7 anyway, just in case you're not, that helps. And when you miss with any magical ranged attack, you can use a bonus action to attack the next closest target with the same attack, once per turn, every turn. Hopefully not any turn, because that means you're missing. Kind of only downside to Arcane Archer is this is all it does. But what it does really well. Do bear in mind that you do need a high intelligence modifier if you want these effects to actually work. Next is the Battle Master. Oh, I just love it. It's always been good, always been great. You can deal extra damage with attacks, and you get different abilities. And some of these are really strong, like knocking enemies prone, like Trip Attack, is far stronger than you might think, especially with bosses in Honor mode, because they can't cast any reactions or legendary actions if they are prone. So it's super strong. You can weaponize your reaction. You can buff allies a little bit. You can give yourself a buff potentially with precision attack. Most are good. One I would definitely avoid is sweeping attack, because you only roll your superiority die for damage. You're not rolling your weapon attack, so you're rolling 1d10. And that's not very much compared to what you do with a normal attack. And kind of like the Arcane Archer, this is all that a Battle Master does, but it does it well. It doesn't get as many superiority dice, but the superiority dice get stronger as we level up. So after these 2 fighter subclasses, I have put 1, 2, 3, 4 Paladin out of 5 Paladin subclasses in A tier. A lot of this is the Paladin class doing heavy lifting, but the subclasses, yeah, they're great. You can't really go wrong with a Paladin. So starting with Oath of the Ancients. So with our Channel Oath charge, you can cast Healing Radiance. Now, this is like supercharged healing. 1, you get to use a bonus action. And secondly, it happens over 2 turns. When you cast Healing Radiance, you get healing around you, plus then the beginning of the next turn, you also get more healing. The amount of healing it does is your proficiency bonus, plus your Paladin level, plus your Charisma modifier. So even if you take just 1 level in Paladin here, and you have all the other levels in some other class, or 2 levels in Paladin, let's be honest, people are going to take 2 for smiting. Well, once you get your character to level 12, the proficiency bonus is going to be 4. Paladin level could be 2. Charisma modifier, if you're multi-classing, could actually be 5. Getting 11 healing. The radius is quite small though, 3 meters, so you have to kind of crowd round. But if you're doing this out of combat anyway, it's great. As a bonus action, I'd say it's much more viable to use in combat. The level 3 Channel Oath abilities aren't as good in my opinion, because they use an action, and compared to attacking / smiting, they're not as impactful. It's a nice way to get speak with animals. For me, what keeps it in A tier, not B tier, I'll explain why I'm a bit less impressed with Ancients when we get to the next Paladin subclass, is we get Misty Step. That's always prepared. Having it as a backup to either get out or into trouble, it's really good. It's good for exploration in case there's somewhere difficult to reach. And the warding is quite nice. You and any nearby allies only take half damage from spells. The number of spellcasters in the game isn't particularly high, but it is still useful to have. Now, after Oath of the Ancients, and why I nearly put it in B tier is because of the new Paladin subclass, Oath of the Crown, because they get to do loads of stuff. And this Oath of the Crown is 100% why Oath of Devotion is never going to be above B tier anymore for me. So they get Righteous Clarity. Target yourself or an ally to additionally grant the target's proficiency bonus to their attack rolls. It's not the same as Devotion because that was Charisma modifier. But this is a bonus action. So I can cast this and will cast this in combat. Plus I can buff an ally. It's not just for myself. So at the beginning of the game, the bonus isn't as good. Perhaps the Oath of Devotion bonus will be better. But once your proficiency bonus is basically at +3, so level 5, you're not going to be far behind your Devotion Paladin. Plus, I'm just going to say again, it is a bonus action. And then at level 3, we get 2 other uses of our Channel Oath charge, and they're both bonus actions as well. Again, that's amazing because it still leaves our action ready to attack. So we can either challenge the enemies around you, compelling them to attack you. This is like Compelled Duel, but AoE as a large area. And I don't think there's, apart from there is the bear, isn't there, for the Beastmaster that has goading roar. But for a player character, this is the only way you can try and get large groups of enemies to potentially attack your Paladin. Normally, your paladin might have a high armor class. Actually, enemies might avoid attacking him because of the high armor class. And then, as an alternative, turn the tide, shout out and heal all nearby non-enemy creatures. So actually will heal anyone who's neutral in the combat or out of combat. And I can't see it here. The radius is far larger than the Oath of the Ancients. It's 9 meters or 30 feet instead of 3 meters or 10 feet. The area you cover is far greater. Not just 3 times higher, it's going to be 9 times higher. For those of you who know maths, pi r squared, right? Now, instead of proficiency bonus, it's a 1d6 plus paladin level plus charisma modifier. So it does potentially a bit less healing over 2 turns because it's only a single bit of healing, but the area is far larger. So you've got 3 fairly good uses of your channel oath charge. I almost put this into S tier, but the S tier subclasses are just that bit better. And we always have command, prepared, and compelled duel. We've got these other spells. You know, Spirit Guardians is kind of cool. Having a paladin run around with Spirit Guardians plus smiting, the enemies stand no chance. And again, something a bit unique. When an ally within 1.5 meters or 5 feet, have to be standing basically next to your ally, you can use a reaction to pretty much stop the damage going to your ally. You instead heal them, but you take some damage to yourself. Now that doesn't use a channel oath charge, so you can just keep using this again and again. Pretty cool, pretty unique. Next up is the Oathbreaker. One thing that I think lets the Oathbreaker down is the level 1 channel oath charge. Steep an enemy in the darkness that churns within you. So they take a little bit of damage and attack rolls against them have advantage, but it uses an action and it kind of only lasts 3 turns. And if you're using your action, it means you only get 2 turns left of actually attacking. So I don't think that actually makes up. That's a tiny bit of damage compared to the damage you do with your weapon, plus it's potentially smiting. See, I don't particularly like this, but from here on out, it's all good. So control undead. You can make some undead follow you instead. What's not to like? The only real limitation towards it is that it doesn't say it here, but there is like a level limit. The target's level must be lower than yours. So you can't use it to control everybody. But we also do get Dreadful Aspect. Again, the downside is it uses your action. So within an area, again, quite a large area, I think it's, 9 meters, 30 feet. All enemies have to succeed a wisdom saving throw, otherwise they're frightened. And that can really just shut down a large group of enemies. I've used it particularly well. Quite early in the game in Grimforge, if you're fighting near, you can shut down a whole load of the Dwergar down there. And then we get Aura of Hate. So if you've got some undead in your party, this works particularly well because then not just you, but any nearby fiends and undead, and this does include enemies, keep that in mind, they gain additional damage to melee weapon attacks equal to your charisma modifier. So you can really buff up your Oathbreaker Paladin here. And to kind of work with that, you do get Animate Dead. Although I will say I do tend to keep my spell slots on a Paladin for smiting. I think most of you are there with me on that. And lastly, Oath of Vengeance. Their level 1 channel oath ability. I do like Inquisitor's Might, apart from the fact it only lasts 2 turns. Thankfully, it's a bonus action, so it's kind of redeemed in that respect, but you're not going to get a lot of use out of it. And the main thing I like it for is the fact it can daze enemies. If you don't know what daze does, well, it reduces their armor class by the dexterity modifier, because they lose the dexterity bonus to their armor class. Bear in mind, if the enemy is wearing heavy armor, that won't affect them. But kind of more importantly, they have disadvantage on wisdom saving throws, and spells that force wisdom saving throws are the controlling spells, and the enemy can't take reactions. Like, it's so much for one single condition. Then at level 3 we get Abjure Enemy, so you can frighten them, and I'm probably not going to use that. I'm going to use Vow of Enmity, and it's a bit strange. It says gain advantage on attack rolls against an enemy, but you can cast Vow of Enmity on yourself and have advantage against all enemies. Again, they haven't fixed it. Don't know why, but why aren't you going to use it? And then spells we get are like Misty Step is good, Hold Person is good, unfortunately requires concentration. And again, you want to usually conserve spell slots for smiting. For the Relentless Avenger, if you pair this up with Polar Master, which now works quite well, it will work okay. But I don't find myself getting a huge number of opportunity attacks. I wouldn't get to use this extra movement speed that much. But it's another solid Paladin subclass because all the Paladins are solid. Right, now that all the Paladins are out the way, time to finish off the Rangers here. We've got Beastmaster and Hunter. So Beastmasters, as the name suggests, they get to have a beast with them. They get a Ranger's Companion, and so it's an extra body on the battlefield, an extra target for the enemies to hit, which saves your characters, and also a tiny bit of extra damage, or giving out some different type of debuffs or some conditions. I quite like the Dire Raven because you can blind enemies. As you level up, your companions get a bit stronger. So for example, at level 5, they get a bit of extra armor class. They get a few more hit points. At level 7, all of them can now kind of act like a rogue. They can use the bonus action to help. I think this is the only way to use help as a bonus action. It doesn't come up too much, but if one of your allies is asleep, you can help them up using the companion. and they get a few more hit points, but level 11 is really where it starts to take off. Now, that is towards the end of the game, but all the companions get extra attack. So the Dire Raven can summon extra Dire Ravens, the Bear can summon an extra Bear, and all of them get extra abilities at level 11. The reason I've put this in A tier is because the subclass remains relevant at the end of the game, and the bonuses they get are good and constantly improve what they do. Whereas some of the other subclasses in the lower tiers, it may be very good at the beginning of the game, but it doesn't carry on towards the end. And after the Beastmaster, I put the Hunter. Now, the thing is, at level 3, these abilities, these choices, Colossus Slayer and Hordebreaker are both good. Giant Killer, you wouldn't get as much use out of this. At least Colossus Slayer works almost every single turn. Hordebreaker, you kind of have to maybe try and set this up. Enemies don't always group together, so you won't be able to use it every turn, but when you do get to use it, it's an extra attack, so that's cool. Then at level 7, we get the defensive tactics. For me, actually, the Hunter dips a bit in the middle levels. Sure, defensive tactics help and they're good, but when we compare it to level 3 and especially level 11, and this is why I've put Hunter in A, because of the level 11 abilities. Volley, fire a cascade of magical broadheads and bodkin arrows upon nearby foes. So you just get this area, 3-meter radius or 10-foot radius circle, and every enemy inside it gets hit. So if you've got sharpshooter and you've got some poison on your arrows, you can apply it to all those attacks. I know we do have arrows of many targets, but like I said, this is my tier list for the way I play, and I've started to use more consumables, I will be honest, but I'm not going to use them every single turn. I might run out, I might need it later. You know, that's what's going through my head. And Body lets me just ignore that. It is great. So they've got, look at the BG3 wiki here. It tells you some useful properties which are applied to every enemy here. If you've got certain weapons or items, and similarly to that, there's Whirlwind attack, but it's just the same for melee weapons, except that the radius is smaller, sadly. Alright, next up we have a sorcerer, Storm Sorcery, the clue's in the name. So at level 1, after you cast a level 1 spell or higher, you can fly as a bonus action. Sadly, it does require the bonus action. So once you get to higher levels, you're going to have to pick, am I going to quicken my spell or am I going to fly away? But I will say, if you've got a ritual spell, I don't know, Featherfall, doesn't really matter. Outside of combat, you can keep casting Featherfall and keep flying. So you can from level, I suppose in level 1, you could actually have your sorcerer who flies. Unfortunately, you have to keep recasting the spell, but it doesn't take away from the fact that they could fly. Then at level 6, you get to deal some little bit of extra damage for thunder and lightning spells. You get resistance to lightning and thunder. And you get some additional spells. That's quite unique for the sorcerer subclasses. Very few get so many spells. And we've got some pretty cool spells and from different levels. So we're not kind of focusing too many spells from one particular spell level. So we've got 2 level 1 spells, a level 2 spell, and 2 level 3 spells. And lastly, when you're struck by a melee attack, you can knock someone back. Generally, it's a fairly good distance. Generally, if someone has kind of come up to you and hit you, you might be able to stop them from being able to walk or run back to you and hit you again. But this is a super solid, very kind of, basic. Is it basic sorcerer? Is it right to say that? But it gets the job done. It focuses on lightning and thunder damage, and it does it well. Next, we have 2 Warlock subclasses, so Fiend and Hexblade. So for the Fiend, whenever you reduce a hostile creature to 0 hit points, this gift from your patron grants you Charisma modifier plus Warlock level temporary hit points. And I'd say it's quite likely you're going to get at least 1 kill every combat with your Warlock. And as you level up, if you level up a lot in Fiend, then you're going to have a lot of temporary hit points, and over the course of a long rest that adds up. It prevents damage going to your actual hit points, prevents you from dying. And what kind of makes the Fiend stand out against some of the other Warlock subclasses are the potential spells that you have, like, on your expanded spell list. So Command is great. People do take a 1 level dip into Fiend just to pick up Command, and I don't blame them. Scorching Ray can really help with the Hat of Fire Acuity, building up your arcane acuity charges very quickly. And we get Fireball. Fireball, again, Fireball's Fireball. It speaks for itself. The level 6 ability it's alright, it's nice. It's not build defining though. Wall of Fire. So level 7, again, the expanded spells, basically I'm saying they're good. I like them. Then at level 10, choose a damage type and become resistant to it. You can pick a new damage type each short rest. So for the Great Old One, a different subclass, you become resistant to psychic damage. As a Fiend, I can choose what type of damage I'm resistant to, including psychic, including any of them. Even bloomin' radiant or force damage or slashing, bludgeoning, piercing. I like that choice. That's versatile. That's good. It helps you stay alive. So the Fiend subclass, it's got a good expanded spell list, and that's really what keeps it in A tier. And then we come to another patch 8 subclass. We come to the Hexblade. If this tier list was purely focused on multiclassing, this would be like top of the list. Absolute top. It's still really, really good. It probably really changes the way you play your Warlock or any character. It's kind of very build defining. So you get proficiency with medium armor, shields, and martial weapons. Basically everything you ever need. There are some good heavy armors, don't get me wrong, but you don't need to have heavy armor. Everyone can do fine with medium or light armor. And you gain Bind Hexed Weapon, which lets you use your Charisma modifier instead of Strength or Dexterity. Now put this on a Paladin, let's say, who gets other bonuses from having a high Charisma, and you don't have to worry about having a high Strength anymore. Thank you very much. And that isn't all that Bind Hexed Weapon does. It means you become proficient with any weapon that you weren't already, so you don't have to do this, but 5 levels in Paladin to get extra attack, 1 level in Hexblade, then you can use your Charisma modifier, 6 levels in Sorcerer or Bard, so you get loads of extra spells and lots of extra spell slots to smite with. And you can potentially get Hexblade's Curse on an enemy, and this is so much for a single level. So you add your proficiency bonus to your damage rolls against them, and the number needed to roll a critical hit is reduced by 1. Or you can put a Hexblade Curse yourself with a bonus action. And then, your expanded spell list, you get Shield. That's amazing. Now, some of the other spells we get aren't necessarily as useful, not that they're really bad, but a lot of them do require concentration, and I'd probably rather be concentrating on something else. So if you've cursed a target at level 6, you can then raise an Accursed Spectre. Getting summons in the combat is good. As I mentioned before, if enemies are targeting your summons, they're not targeting you. You are surviving, you are living, you can continue doing your damage. As we go on, we get some extra spells. Banishing Smite is now, this is the second way you can now get Banishing Smite. The only other way is from Bard's Magical Secrets. Staggering Smite is okay, but again, you've got to be careful that you don't pick too many concentration spells. And then level 10, when a creature you cursed with Hexblade's Curse attacks you, you can potentially nullify the attack as a reaction. Has a 50% chance of succeeding. The only real downside is it's only for 1 attack. So if you've got someone or an enemy with extra or multi-attack, you can only make one of them miss. But it's not bad at all. This is probably one of the most front-loaded subclasses in the whole of the game. You get so much at level 1 that, a lot of people feel like they don't need to take anything past level 1. And if you are playing a Hexblade, I feel like you don't need to focus on Eldritch Blast anymore. You free up your invocations to do other things. So the Hexblade really, really does change how you play the game. Then the last 2 subclasses I put into A tier, 2 wizards, Blade Singing and Divination. So another patch 8 subclass here, Blade Singing. And a little bit like the Hexblade, the Blade Singing wizard, Blade Singing subclass actually really changes how you play your wizard. So we get Blade Song, but we only get 2 per long rest. I feel like I would put Blade Singing higher if we got more. So you get a bonus to armor class, your movement speed, advantage in acrobatics, that doesn't come up too much. And a +2 bonus to Constitution saving throws, that's all good. You gain proficiency with light armor. That's nice, because that means you don't need to worry necessarily about wearing mage armor or casting mage armor. Get access to other armors, and actually not just talking about body armor, but actually helmets and gloves, and sometimes boots are light armor, whereas before you wouldn't be able to use them. And you become proficient with all of these different types of weapons. One thing that isn't mentioned here, that I really love, we get new animations, and they're amazing. I love the new animations, combat animations. I almost wish every subclass had completely different animations. I do understand that would be a massive ask though. So not only are we a wizard with a full spellcasting potential, but at level 6 we can then make 2 attacks. Of course, one of which can be Booming Blade. Now what's not actually mentioned here, I'm going to have to go into Blade Song, is you get Blade Song Climax. While you are in Blade Song, you can build up charges, and there are 2 different types of charge. There are damage charges and healing charges. So to build up the damage charge, you have to cast a level 1 spell or above that are not weapon attacks. So basically you can't use smites, I suppose that would be. And for every weapon attack you do, well, this is why it doesn't build up damage charges. To build up healing charges, you attack by using weapons. So before the end of your Blade Song, make sure you do use this, because you can either deal out a lot of extra damage or get out some healing. So not only do you get your buffs from being in Blade Song, you can actually then do extra things towards the end. What's not mentioned on this page, but is mentioned in the Blade Song page, as you level up, you get the bonus to armor class and Constitution saving throws goes up with your proficiency bonus. I understand that in Dungeons and Dragons, it was equal to your intelligence bonus, so actually you could have a very large bonus from a very low level. Larian decided to change that, probably for the worse, but hey, it's the way it is. That's what we've got to deal with. And lastly, when you take damage during Blade Song, you can expend a spell slot to subtract 5 damage per spell slot. I'd say unless you're on the verge of dying, that's probably not worth using. Your spell slots are, I would suggest, better off just to attack or control your enemies. But Blade Singing is great. The Blade Singer is great. Highly recommend it. Check it out. And then the last subclass I put into A tier is a Divination School. This is probably my favorite type of wizard, although Blade Singer is coming in very close second now. So we get Portent, your dreams grant you glimpses. So once every long rest, you get 2 dice that you can use, and you can use a reaction to change the die of any attack roll or saving throw. That can be of either allies or enemies. So if you've got a Portent die of a 3, you can make an enemy fail a saving throw. Or with very high numbers, you can make your allies hit. Now at level 2, it's just 2 per long rest. It's kind of not very many, but thankfully at level 6, you get 1 extra portent die, so it goes up from 2 to 3. And when you take a short rest, you receive a set of prophecies. I've read some people like really don't like these. I don't mind. Most of them are quite easy to like fulfill. So you get more than just 3 portent dice per long rest. I understand also people don't like the fact there are pop-ups. So if you don't like pop-ups, this isn't for you. Sorry to say. If you don't mind them, like myself, then it's great. It's amazing. You get to choose as and when you use them. And because you get to choose when to use it, you get to choose when it would be most effective to use it. So that's it for A tier, just a few left at the top at S tier. If you've jumped to this part of the video just to see what's in S tier and uncovering all of the subclasses, well done, you can give yourself a pat on the back. However, if you're going to come here without having watched the rest of the video and then saying something like, "Ooh, you put Glamour Bard in B tier, I can't trust your list," I'm going to think you're a bit of a fool. If you don't agree with one of these, at least give me the courtesy of listening to my explanation and then trying to counter my explanation and my reasoning. If you can't, and you're just going to kind of tell me like, "Oh yeah, life is obviously A tier," tell me why. If not, you're just going to get ignored. And I truly don't see the purpose of your comment if you're just going to say anything like that. However, that doesn't apply to most of you. A lot of you are great in the comments and explain why you agree or disagree with me. And that's fine. Like I said earlier in the video, this isn't an objective tier list, this is my tier list. But if you're not going to counter my arguments and just attack my opinion for no reason, I can only assume you're doing that in bad faith. So yeah, I won't engage with you. Moving on, the top of S tier, just because it's the one that comes first alphabetically, is Barbarian. We've got the Berserker. And this is here almost for one reason, and it's this Enraged Throw. If you're going to make a throwing build, honestly, the Berserker Barbarian is kind of just it. Although I did kind of cover Giant Barbarians, are also very good. But this dealing additional damage, I don't care about that. And knocking it prone. There's no save against it. If you hit an enemy with Enraged Throw, they are knocked prone. And as I've mentioned with some of the other subclasses, having especially bosses prone means they don't get to use any legendary actions or reactions. No enemy gets to use a reaction. It's one of the most powerful actual types of control, apart from like, this type of control is dead. You know. If we're actually talking about control, prone is really good. The other benefits we get are right. It's good that you can't be charmed or frightened. The level 10 ability I wouldn't use. I mean, if you're going to go in Berserker, 8 levels is probably enough. Get your second feat, and as a Barbarian, you get the extra initiative and you can't be surprised. You don't need to go any further. You might even just stop at 3 or 5. Now, you can also use Frenzied Strike, but down here. Each time you use it, you get a -1 penalty to further attack rolls. And over the course of a combat, that can start to kind of add up. But for Enraged Throw, we don't get that. You can just keep throwing. The Berserker Thief multiclass is just amazing. Next up is the Swords Bard. This is why Valor's all the way in D tier. So at level 3, we get proficiency in medium armor. Okay, Valor Bards get shields extra and all martial weapons extra. But Swords Bards, contrary to their name, in Baldur's Gate 3, you're probably going to be using a ranged attack because, for whatever reason, Slashing Flourish ranged lets you target the same enemy twice. It says attack up to 2 enemies at once. Here they've called it a bug. I don't know if it actually is. Maybe it's a bug that became a feature. I know in Dungeons and Dragons it would not work like this, but it's worked like this since the very beginning in Baldur's Gate 3 and it hasn't been changed in, well, coming up to 2 years. So we also get extra attack. And this Slashing Flourish uses one of those 2 attacks. So what this means is you can target a single enemy using your Bardic Inspiration dice up to 4 times in one turn. And ranged attacks can do very well with Sharpshooter. You've got some amazing ranged weapons out, the Titan String Bow, for example. Again, yeah, we've got the Arrow of Many Targets, but like I said with the Hunter, I'm not going to use one of those every single damn turn. I'm going to run out. Also, I don't want to spend like half an hour just farming arrows of many targets. At that point, I'm probably just going to like cheat them into or mod them into the game. Get them into the game some other way, like rather than waste my time farming. Plus, you've got these other flourishes if you want to use them as well. And we get a fighting style. I'm probably not going to use these fighting styles very much, actually. You only get to pick out of dueling and 2-weapon fighting. But you've got to remember, we've got the Hat of Arcane Acuity. So each time we hit an enemy with a weapon attack, we get 2 stacks. So in a single turn, you can get 8 stacks of Arcane Acuity. Then you've got the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel, casting your illusion or enchantment spells with a bonus action. It's just so strong. If you add in a little bit of multicasting, it becomes like even stronger. So yeah, Swords Bard's right at the top. The Valor Bard has got nothing compared to this. Both of them get the extra attack, but Swords Bard can effectively hit twice as many enemies. All right, then the Eldritch Knight, the top fighter subclass. So you can actually make a throwing build of the Eldritch Knight as well because of Weapon Bond. So you can get a throwing weapon, and then if you throw it, it automatically returns to you when thrown. Plus, you get spells. Since patch 8, Eldritch Knights have got even better with Booming Blade. I'll explain why in a second. So we get access to these spells, we get shield. That's kind of what you probably want and you're going to use. Your action is almost certainly going to be used to attack. Maybe outside combat, you're going to use your action, you're going to maybe cast some other spells. When I play, I'm generally reserving my spell slots for shield, and I might take a ritual spell or two, just because then I don't have to worry about spell slots. And then we get to level 7. So after you cast a cantrip, you can make a weapon attack using a bonus action. I've released a build, I think it's going to be the video prior to this one, where just a pure 12 levels in Eldritch Knight, every single turn you get 4 attacks, because your first attack of the round can and should be Booming Blade. Because Booming Blade doesn't take up your whole action, it just takes up one of your 3 attacks. Bear in mind, at level 12, you get 3 attacks, or level 11, you get 3 attacks as a fighter, and Booming Blade is a cantrip, and so you could get 4 attacks per turn, as long as your first attack is Booming Blade. When I was making that video, it seemed that if I attacked with a regular attack first and then Booming Blade, I wasn't getting the bonus action attack. But regardless of that, it's amazing. We've got the Hat of Arcane Acuity as well. So if you really want to have your Eldritch Knight casting from a scroll, from an item, or just one of the spells that they've got, you're going to be doing very, very well. But do bear in mind that the Eldritch Knight and also Arcane Trickster get a very limited number of spell slots. And then on top of that, when you hit a creature with a weapon attack at level 10, it has disadvantage on the next saving throw against the spell you cast before the end of your next turn. That's going to be another candidate for using a scroll, another time to potentially use a scroll. But also keep in mind, one action will be 1 spell, but you can get 3 or basically 4 attacks per turn if you start with Booming Blade, and you can make your weapon damage be very high. But even if you're not leading into the Booming Blade aspect, you're a very good thrower. And honestly, this is like probably one of the strongest, like just 12 straight levels in a single subclass. You just can't go wrong with Eldritch Knight. Alright, then on to the Open Hand Monk. This was actually the very first tab I made. My very first own character was an Open Hand Monk. So at level 3, instead of making enemies drunk, I'm just going to compare this to Drunken Master at the moment, we can either topple an enemy. I've gone over prone now by this point in the video. You understand, hopefully you understand how much I like making enemies prone. You can stagger them, which makes them unable to use reactions, which actually I don't see the point in stagger if you can knock enemies prone. I suppose that's the if. Not every enemy can be knocked prone. Stagger is still good. Or knock them back. Then at level 6, you get to add an extra, well, whatever damage type of these 3 you want, extra damage to each attack, or each unarmed attack, sorry. And bearing in mind, you're probably going to do 3 or 4 attacks per turn. That starts to add up quite a lot. Wholeness of body, regain half your key points, and this wholeness is great. You get 1 key point every turn. That's not really what it's for. You get an extra bonus action. So if you go like 9 or 8 levels of Wear the Open Hand and then become a thief, when you use Wholeness of Body, you got 3 bonus actions. That's amazing. And you can make up for one of the monk's kind of flaws, negative sides, things it's weaker at, doing area of effect damage. This whole resonate thing, you can make enemies resonate and then you can just blast it. And you do a whole load of force damage, I believe. 3d6 force damage per explosion, so you can have loads of them around. As with all monks, Tavern Brawler just makes you super overpowered. But yeah, the reason like Drunken Master is so low is, well, when we can do this instead of what the Drunken Master does, I'm going to go with this if I have to choose and stay alive. But like I said, you know, all subclasses are viable. Even though I'm saying negative things about the Drunken Master, it's just that the way of the Open Hand, it's just so good at what it does, it's difficult not to pick this. Right, the penultimate subclass, the Draconic Bloodline Sorcerer. So at level 1, when you aren't wearing armor, your base armor class is 13. That's the equivalent to having mage armor cast on you. So if you're going to be a sorcerer that wouldn't normally wear light armor, you save yourself having to cast light armor every single day. Well, don't have to, but you know, your armor class is going to be 13 anyway. You get an extra hit point per level. It's not a lot, but it helps. You're going to have a few extra hit points compared to other sorcerers. Then you get 1 extra spell based on your ancestry. Most of these aren't too impactful. Some of them are not sorcerer spells, are the ones with a star. So if you want access to some different spells, this is the one way of doing it for a sorcerer. When you cast a spell that deals damage to the type associated with your ancestry, you add your charisma modifier to the damage. This is where you can have this and maybe the potent robe and maybe the necklace of elemental augmentation. You can really start to kind of add together lots of damage just on your cantrips. Though, like for example, if you're picking a fire sorcerer, you're going to have to make a firebolt. But acid's an interesting choice because you can have acid splash, which normally doesn't do a huge amount of damage. You know, once you're at level 12, it's 3d6 per creature if they fail the dexterity saving throw. But you can start to really add damage and it starts to build up. But of course, we're a sorcerer. We have quicken spell. We've got the Hat of Fire acuity. So if you pick Scorching Ray and you are one of the 3 fire types, each of those Scorching Rays does quite a bit of extra damage. It can really add up very quickly. You can give yourself resistance to the damage type that you've got the affinity for. I'm not sure it's worth it. This is one pop-up. I might actually just click OK just to stop it from coming up the rest of the long rest. And at level 11, you can fly. As I've mentioned, any character can fly with a certain choice. If you don't want to make that choice, this is one great way of getting it. So part of the reason we've got the Draconic Bloodline Sorcerer up here is because it's a sorcerer. I've mentioned Quicken Spell a few times now, but throwing out 2 spells, being able to get really high arcane acuity stacks just makes your sorcerer very, very strong. And lastly, just because we're going for like wizard, we've got the Abjuration Wizard. So kind of the ultimate, I guess, defensive wizard, but you can make them offensive at the same time. So what do we get? We get this Arcane Ward. You build up charges of your Arcane Ward, and you can do this by casting an Abjuration spell, and you get charges equal to the spell's level up to a maximum of 2 times your wizard level. Now, what does the ward do? Each time you take damage, the ward blocks an amount of damage equal to its intensity. So if you had 12 stacks of it and you got hit for 15 damage, well, actually it's going to be 15 minus 12, and then the intensity, the number of stacks, decreases by 1. So it goes from 12 down to 11. Then the next attack that comes in, you're going to take 11 damage from that. And so the higher you make the stacks, the higher you increase the intensity of Arcane Ward, the more it does for you, because it blocks more attacks and blocks more damage. And then at level 6, you can cast this around one of your allies. So you don't just have to save yourself, you can save your allies as well. And then at level 10, each time you short rest, you get an Arcane Ward equal to your wizard level. So what you can do with a little tiny bit of multi-classing is perhaps just take 1 level in Warlock. So you get Armor of Agathis. You can upcast Armor of Agathis. So let's say you had 11 levels in Wizard and 1 in Warlock. You can get 22 charges of Arcane Ward. Cast Armor of Agathis, upcast it to level 6. So then it's got 30 temporary hit points. And while those temporary hit points last, you're going to be dealing cold damage. 30 cold damage to the enemies. You can make them wet. So you're dealing 60 cold damage to enemies. And you're going to keep doing that until your temporary hit points disappear. And with such a large number of charges on your Arcane Ward, that's going to keep on going for a very long time. Now, is it the most interesting way to play? Maybe not. Is it a little bit tedious? Perhaps. But is it effective? For sure. I've not actually done this in a long time, but I do recognise that you can make a stupidly strong wizard from this. And keep in mind, you can force enemies to make opportunity attacks against you, so they start taking damage from you. And it almost seems a bit silly that you're just running around during your turn trying to get enemies to attack you so they take 60 damage. But obviously you have to make them wet first. But yeah, I love wizards. I actually love the versatility of the spells that they can have. They write their spells, can change their spells. I love having access to lots of different spells. I think some of it just makes me happy to see the spells in my spellbook, not that I always use all of them. And when we've got, just for wizards in particular, like Abjuration, Blade Singing, and Divination wizards, this is why Conjuration and Illusion all the way down here. So a few final thoughts. I kind of mentioned it a few times by now. This is my tier list, not your tier list. And what I hope you get from this isn't that, oh right, I'm going to go make a Berserker now. What I hope you get is if you've heard my overview of each of these subclasses and that you've learned something or realized there's a different way you can play using the subclasses, or perhaps you're going to give something another go. Or you're going to try and prove me wrong and you're going to make a build like with a Valabard and show it off and be like, oi, look, Valabards aren't that bad. And you never know, you might change my mind and I might put it into C tier. So really, thank you if you've made it this far. This has been a long video because there's just so much to look at and talk about. I've put a link to the tier list in the description of the video so you can play around with it as well. I do hope that you appreciate the fact I've put the names of each of the subclasses and not just use the icons, because actually some of them aren't so obvious. Those of you that have played for a long time could probably tell what's what, but I hope you found those useful. Thank you to the members of my channel. Please let me know what you think about the subclasses, and as I've already requested, don't attack me, attack my arguments. So once again, thank you very much, and hopefully I'll catch you in the next one.